The hallway narrowed behind her, trapping her in place. She felt it before she saw it. The walls pressing, imperceptibly at first, like the building itself had inhaled, drawing in the air around her. The carpet underfoot no longer felt horizontal, its fibers slick with a damp she couldn't place. She leaned against the wall, fingertips grazing the wallpaper. The texture pulsed beneath her touch, subtle, almost vascular, like it was alive. Her pulse spiked. She had walked this corridor before, just yesterday, but now it seemed impossible. The distance from door to door had changed, shifted. The ceiling sagged slightly, and she could swear the light above her swayed. The bulbs flickered, then steadied, leaving a stubborn shadow along the far wall that hadn't been there moments ago. She stepped forward, careful, barefoot. The carpet's fibers pressed unevenly into the soles of her feet, uneven, like ridges of a miniature canyon. Her fingers traced the edge of the wall. It felt wrong. Smooth where it should have been textured, cool where it should have been warm. Her nails scraped faintly, a tiny echo answering her touch. A draft whispered along the corridor, carrying a faint metallic tang. She inhaled sharply. Her breath echoed back to her, but slower, stretched out unnaturally. Each exhale hung in the air, a gray smear she could almost see. The walls were breathing. She tried to turn back. She took 2 steps, but the space behind her was narrower than it had been. The doorway she had come through seemed further away, or maybe closer. She couldn't tell. Panic pinched her chest. She forced herself to calm, counting her steps. 1, 2, 3. But each number sounded stretched, dragged across the hall like it belonged to a different room entirely. A door on her left quivered. Not the door itself, but the frame. It bent slightly, then snapped back, like a lung emptying. She paused. There was no wind. The doorknob glinted, far too low or far too high, she couldn't decide. Her hand rose of its own accord. The metal was sticky, cool, and she jerked back as the echo of her movement arrived half a second too late. The hallway extended suddenly. Long, impossibly long. She could see the far end, but it was twisted, coiled like a staircase laid flat. Shadows pooled along the baseboards, curling upward, shifting with each blink. She could hear the carpet hiss under her weight. Hiss like fabric burning on a stove or lungs inhaling too quickly. She moved forward, slow. The walls whispered in low frequency, almost imperceptible. Not words, just a vibration through her bones. Her knees trembled. She pressed her palm against the wall again. It gave slightly, yielding as if it were wet plaster, then hardened with a suction that tugged at her fingers. A door at the end of the hall appeared to breathe. The shadow bent around it like water. She imagined stepping closer, but each footfall felt heavier, as if gravity itself was thickening around her. A soft scrape echoed from above, then another. Not nails, something larger, something dragging across the ceiling. She ducked instinctively. The ceiling was lower now, no more than 3 feet above her head. She couldn't tell if it had descended or if the hall had expanded. The geometry made no sense. Her balance shifted subtly, but she was sure she hadn't moved sideways. She tried to scream. The sound clawed at her throat and hung in the air, bouncing back in distorted fragments. Her voice lagged behind her mouth, syllables stretched like taffy. She gagged. A chill rose along her spine. Something waited in the stretched shadows, unseen but present, pressing just beyond the limits of her vision. The walls closed in incrementally, inches at a time. She could feel the pressure on her shoulders, subtle yet unrelenting. She stepped sideways to relieve it. The wall behind her. She thought she saw it pulse, a slow wave moving toward her like a tide. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the hallway no longer allowed backward motion. Her fingers grazed the edge of a doorway on her right. The door frame wavered, bending outward, the wood fibers rippling under her touch. She pressed harder, knuckles whitening, and felt the wood give. It exhaled. A soft sigh, low and wet, echoed through the hall. She jerked away. Her hand left a faint smear, not dirt, Not blood, but some residue she couldn't name. A whisper slithered through the hallway. Not her name, not a word, just the sound of air moving around something large, slow, deliberate. She turned her head, eyes straining. The far end of the hallway was impossible. The ceiling arched into nothing, then twisted down into a floor she hadn't noticed before. She could walk into the shadowed fold, and perhaps it would swallow her, she thought, and maybe she should. A wall to her left undulated, subtly, like a living membrane. She leaned against it instinctively. Pressure met her back. Her shoes left no print. The carpet reformed behind her, smooth and untouched. She reached for the door at the end, but her arms stretched impossibly, like it belonged to a different space, detached from her body. The light flickered again. Pattern emerged. She swore the walls were marked. Symbols carved into the plaster, faint but alive, shifting, turning to follow her gaze. She blinked. They were gone. When she looked back, they had multiplied. Each line a thin wound in the wall, bleeding faint gray shadow. Her chest tightened. Each breath burned. Her vision tunneled. The hallway. The hallway laughed without sound. The walls expanded and contracted rhythmically, breathing her in, pushing her out, rejecting her at once. She wanted to move faster, but motion slowed, delayed, her limbs obeying an alien timetable. The ceiling creaked. A drip fell from above. She caught it on her tongue. Metallic, warm. She swallowed and gagged. The drip echoed somewhere behind her, closer than it should have been, yet she dared not turn. The hallway twisted again. The floor seemed to tilt, and she fought against the tilt that should not exist. Her stomach lurched. She pressed her forehead to the wall. It was moist, sticky, and vibrated softly, responding to her heartbeat. She thought she saw the exit, the light of a room she recognized. She sprinted. Every step fell late, echoes of footfalls bouncing back at her before she touched the floor. The doorway receded. She tried to reach it. Her fingertips brushed the frame, thin air. Nothing. Behind her, the hallway narrowed, closer than before. The walls now practically brushed her shoulders. She stumbled, fell, hands pressing against both walls at once, and felt the subtle give of wood, plaster, carpet, all shifting under her weight, under her fear. A soft, wet sigh came from the walls themselves. Her mind screamed. The hallway. It was alive, watching, responding, waiting. She tried to call out again. Her voice reached her ears delayed, doubled, warped. She could hear her own panic, a whisper too far away to locate. She pressed forward. The ceiling arched overhead, impossibly high, then dropped sharply, grazing the back of her head. The floor beneath her feet buckled in miniature waves, shifting her balance. The exit she remembered. It was gone. The hallway behind her. The walls had forgotten her name, her face. She had no past here. Only the present, only the push of walls, the shift of floors, the pull of ceiling, the soft, wet sigh of something aware. She froze. Air left her lungs. The carpet hissed beneath her weight. Light bent around the edges of the walls. Depth dissolved into depth, distance into distance, time into pause. She could not move, could not retreat, could not advance. A hand-shaped shadow stretched along the far wall. She did not move. It did not reach for her. Yet it was near. The wall sighed, folded, and exhaled. She could feel it waiting. And then the hallway shifted again. The light switch turned off something else. It clicked under her fingers like any ordinary switch, a small, abrupt sound. The ceiling light blinked once, then went dark. Her bedroom, which had seemed perfectly ordinary moments before, was suddenly unfamiliar. Not because the light was gone, the bulbs had always been incandescent, but because the absence of light carried with it a weight. A silence that wasn't quite silence. She froze, hand lingering in the air, fingertips still grazing the switch plate. The air felt heavier, as though the room itself had inhaled sharply. A faint pressure pressed against the back of her skull, subtle, imperceptible at first, then unmistakable. The corners of the room seemed to curve inward, stretching the walls just enough to catch her eye. The hum of the refrigerator from the hallway seemed distant, distorted, as though the world beyond the room had retreated. The floor beneath her bare feet felt unnervingly soft, the fibers of the carpet absorbing her weight instead of pushing back. She shifted slightly, testing the space, and the room responded. A subtle swell of shadow rippled along the far wall. She told herself it was nothing, just the brain filling in gaps in the dark. But her eyes traced the corners automatically, and her gaze caught a shadow by the door that hadn't been there a moment ago. It didn't belong to her or any object in the room. It shifted just slightly, like the light itself had left behind an echo of movement. She reached for her phone on the bedside table. The screen's glow seemed smaller, contained, almost suffocated. When she touched it, the device felt cold, unnatural, and the light from the screen fractured against the room's angles in odd ways. She could see the shadow move again, no longer bound to the wall. The silence thickened, not the quiet of a room without sound, but the quiet of anticipation, of something waiting. The clock ticked, but its sound stretched, lagging. Each second lengthened, the hand moving unevenly around the face. She blinked, and for a moment, the room seemed to contract, as though the ceiling had dropped an inch or two. Her breath echoed. Not her own echo. The room seemed to absorb it, then return it slightly distorted, as if mocking her. The familiar posters on the walls leaned inward subtly, angles wrong, images distorted. A photograph of herself as a child appeared elongated, the face too thin, eyes too dark. She looked away, trying to reassure herself, but when she glanced back, the frame had moved closer to the edge of the wall, as though repositioned by some unseen hand. She touched the switch again, half expecting light to return. Nothing. The darkness remained, but the oppressive stillness lifted slightly, replaced by a soft, uneven draft brushing against her neck. It carried a faint metallic scent, like copper or rust, lingering and sharp. She spun in a slow circle, trying to locate its source. The room had changed subtly again. The desk near the window seemed farther than it should have been. The chair twisted slightly away from the desk, as though aware of her gaze. Her heartbeat sped, loud in her ears. She told herself it was fatigue, stress. She had been up late last night, reading. She had a glass of water next to the bed. That glass was now nowhere to be found. She reached where it should have been. Cold plastic. Empty. The table had shifted a few inches closer to the bed, then away when she blinked. The switch had turned off more than light. It had turned off the normal rules of the room. The solidity of objects, the linearity of space, the certainty of angles, all suspended. A floorboard creaked in the hall outside. She froze. The sound was normal, yet it carried the same stretched, unnatural quality as the tick of the clock. When she listened, the hallway was not silent. Something moved there, slow, deliberate, but it was not air or floor or footstep. The sound had a presence. She forced herself to step toward the doorway. The floor sagged slightly beneath her weight, softening, then snapping back. The threshold expanded and contracted as she approached, a breathing frame. She reached for the knob. Her hand felt it, but the surface was warmer than brass should be. The knob rotated without resistance. But when she tried to open the door, the hallway beyond seemed to recede into black nothingness. She pulled back. A small whimper escaped her throat. The room responded, shadows crawling upward, pooling along the ceiling now, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. She didn't recognize their geometry, yet they were deliberate, purposeful. Her pulse hammered. She moved backward, and the shadows shifted with her, stretching like ink in water, tracking, observing. She needed light. She tried the switch again, desperate. The click echoed, sharp, final. Still darkness, still wrongness. Her body tensed. The room's air felt viscous now, thick with an invisible weight pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the carpet fibers bend beneath her feet as she shifted, then resist again. The room flexed with her movement, subtly, unnervingly. The mirror on the wall caught her eye. She forced herself to look. Her reflection was delayed, a fraction of a second behind her movements, and when her head turned, it lingered a moment, almost reaching toward the edge of the glass. The reflection did not breathe. Its chest remained still, even as her own inhalation rose and fell. She stepped closer. The mirror's surface rippled faintly under her gaze, as if liquid, and then froze. Her reflection smiled. She had not smiled. She stepped back, stumbling slightly. When she looked again, it had returned to neutral, watching. The air tightened. She could hear it pulling in, somewhere deep in the room. A faint vibration under her feet, under the walls. Something was there, just out of sight. Something that had been turned off with the light. She realized then that the room itself had been living in two layers. One seen, one unseen. She had been blind to the second layer until the switch was flipped. A soft tapping began, light at first, like fingernails against the windowsill. Then heavier, faster, echoing from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Each tap seemed synchronized with her heartbeat, lagging a fraction behind. The pressure on her chest increased. She could not breathe. The air was thick, sticky, compressing. She ran to the door, flung it open, and the hallway beyond was as it had always been, or so it seemed. A glance over her shoulder, back at the bedroom, made her stop cold. The darkness within was not darkness now. It had substance, a waiting shape. It pulsed with the rhythm of a slow, deliberate breathing. She could not see it fully, but she knew it waited, stretching, calculating. She ran into the hall. The switch in the room clicked again in her mind, though she had not touched it. The sensation of absence, of something turned off, lingered. Somewhere behind her, something stayed dormant, just out of perception, tied irrevocably to that first click. Her apartment was quiet now, normal, safe. She could see everything, measure distances, reach out and touch objects. And yet, she could not shake the feeling that something had been switched off, and that it was still off somewhere. Watching, waiting. She touched the wall as she passed, fingers grazing the smooth plaster. It hummed faintly. She recoiled. Not electricity, not warmth. Something else entirely. Something patient. The light in her bedroom remained off, and she did not go back.